Good morning, everybody, and welcome to City Hall, welcome to Council Chambers, and to the meeting of the Los Angeles City Council for today, Wednesday, January 16th, year is 2002. City Council meets every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10 a.m., and you're all invited to join us at each council meeting. You can also view us live from home on your cable station, Channel 35.
Buenos días a todos, estamos aquí en City Council.
The city's homepage, or listen in on council phone. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Burnson, Galanter, Garcetti, Han, Holden, Labange, Miskowski, Pacheco, Perry, Reyes, Ridley, Thomas, Weiss, Zine, Padilla. 11 members present and a quorum, Mr. President.
Miembros presentes, está abierto para
approval of the minutes.
La aprobación de los minutos.
Mr.
Samuel,
Garcetti, second.
el señor Garcetti los
Commendatory resolutions for approval.
Ms. Han, Mr. Zine, seconds.
On the regular agenda, item number 1 is an item noticed for public hearing, and I believe there are cards on the item.
We do have cards in that item. Let's call it special.
Vamos a llamarlo especial.
Next items for which public hearings have been held, items 2 through 9. Item 3 is a communication from the chair of Plum Committee, so a motion is required on that, and 2 and 3 are ords. Do you wish to hold those for 12 council members?
Let's hold those on the desk. So items 3 through 9 are before us. Item 4 through 9. And item 4 requiring a motion?
No, Mr. President, it's item 3 that requires the motion.
Items 4 through 9, public hearings have been held. Are there any specials? Items 4 through 9. Any specials? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Items 4 through 9. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
Those are approved. Next item, please.
Next items for which public hearings have not been held, items 10 through 29. Item 22 is a communication from the EERC, and that submitted the DWP Commissioner's recommendations without recommendation.
Let's call that special.
Vamos a llamar este especial.
And I do not have requests from members of the public to be heard on the balance of the items. Let's deem the public hearings open and closed. I believe items 10, 11, and 12 are ordinances. Let's hold those on the desk and await 12 members. Items 13 through 29. Mr. Weiss.
Call 27 special.
Mr. Weiss calls 27 specials. Are there any other specials? Any other specials? Items 13 through 29, with the exception of 22 and 27. In item 13, the recommendation is to receive and file. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
Those items are approved. Next item, please.
Item number 30 is the closed session. Do you wish to hold that on the desk?
Let's hold that on the desk.
Item number 1 is the next item, and that has cards from the public.
Members of the public wishing to be heard on item number 1, the council calls forward Ms. Laura Lake to be followed by Ms. Terry Fignasian.
Good morning. I fully support Councilman Weiss's motion before you this morning and appreciate his assistance with this. Thank you.
Ms. Fignasian.
Yes, as one of the appellants, we also support this motion to withdraw this entire project from consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your brevity. This now closes the public comment for item number 1. Members wishing to be heard on item number 1. Mr. Weiss.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to acknowledge that Ms. Tignasian and Ms. Lake came down this morning to council. It's really nice to see you here, and it's very nice that we're working together on this important first step to revitalize Westwood. Colleagues, today is it's a new day in Westwood, because many of you who have been around this worship for a while are familiar with a development controversy which has long plagued my district. It was known, unfortunately for many folks, as the Smedra development controversy. That was the name of the developer who first proposed the development. It was a large-scale mall that was out of keeping with what Westwood needs, was out of keeping with the surrounding communities, and was not really the proper vision I believe, for the future of the west side of Los Angeles. And it engendered a lot of controversy, and frankly, it engendered a lot of unnecessary controversy, a lot of unnecessary conflict. A lot of heels got dug in on both sides and throughout the community. It's my hope that today we're going to move forward in a more collaborative, positive vein. I want to also acknowledge that the chairman of our Planning and Land Use Committee has been very supportive of not only the measure that we have before us today, but he's been very supportive for me personally. Mr. Reyes is someone with a lot of experience and expertise in the area of planning and the very technical issues that arise. He's been a mentor to me. I really appreciate that, and I know we're going to have an opportunity to work together in the coming months and years to revitalize Westwood. So, colleagues, I'd ask for you to join me today in denying the application that had been made, the numerous applications that had been made many times to develop this mall in Westwood, and join me in celebrating a really positive new beginning for this important part of my district. So I move to deny the applications that have been put before you.
Mr. Burnson.
Yes, I want to commend Mr. Weiss on making the right decision. We've watched this for quite some time with a lot of concern, and I don't know, whoever the council member was from that district, whether it was you or somebody else, I was prepared to oppose this project if it went forward. I'm happy to see that you're on the right track, and I know the community has long been concerned. I know you say there were a lot of people that heels dug in on both sides. I only know of one side. I don't think I heard anybody from the regular residential community or business community in the area that supported this project. So thanks for doing what's appropriate. Thanks for the people over in that area for being outspoken and letting us know how they felt about it.
Mr. Reyes.
Señor Reyes.
Colleagues,
Colegas,
President, I just want to rise and say thank you for my colleague Jack Weiss, and look forward to working with you in this area that's very important. It's one of the hubs of the west side. It's very challenging knowing that the UCLA campus is just north, and we have our work cut out for us. But look forward to working with you in the community. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Any other members wishing to be heard on item number 1? Then seeing none, Madam Clerk, please open the roll on the Weiss motion. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Mr. Weiss's motion is approved. Next item, please.
Mr. President, there are 14 members present now. Do you wish to take up the ordinances? That would be items 2 and 3, and 10, 11, and 12.
Sure. Items 10, 11, and 12, having no requests from members of the public to be heard, shall satisfy the public hearing. Members wishing to be heard on items 2, 3, 10, 11, or 12. Seeing none, Madam Clerk, let's open the roll. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Those ordinances are approved. Next item, please.
Next item, Mr. President, item number 22, that was called special. It is EERC communication submitted without, the Water and Power Commissioners' recommendations are submitted without recommendation by the EERC.
Okay. Anybody wishing to be heard on item number 22? We do need a motion from the floor. Does Chair of the Commerce Committee wish to make a motion? Ms. Galanter? Item number 22 is an EERC item. Did you wish to make a motion? Ms. Galanter moves approval. Anybody wishing to be heard on this item? Seeing none. And Mr. Garcetti?
Yes, just one quick question. Obviously, I think Mr. Wiggs is very strongly supported here, and I know the recommendation. I was just wondering if anybody can tell me from maybe the CAO whether or not the monthly housing allowance is normal for general managers, either the proprietary departments or other ones?
Mr. CAO?
and if any of this might be available for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund.
This is the only instance where we've recommended monthly housing allowance for a general manager.
And what is the reason behind it?
At one point, the gentleman was, his primary residence was in Texas. I understand he has since relocated to Southern California, but it was part of the base salary recommended, while the base salary compensation recommended when he was appointed the interim general manager. And basically what's being proposed now is a continuation of that allowance.
Okay, colleagues, definitely a big fan of Mr. Wiggs, but I would move that we go with the recommendation minus the housing salary, seeing as how Mr. Wiggs now resides here. If anybody wants to second.
Mr. Zine.
Thank you, Mr. President. The salary, is that public or is that for closed session? You can mention salary, it doesn't mention the salary.
At this point, given it's on your agenda, it is public.
What is that? Because it's not on the agenda. I'm sure it's a lot of money.
It's in the report.
It's in the, all right. I've discovered where it's located, but it is public knowledge.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Okay. Why is it in the sealed envelope then?
Council has the option to go into closed session on this matter if they choose to.
Okay, I was just curious to see what it was. So if anyone wants to know, I'll know the answer.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Holman.
Housing allowance of $3,500 a month? For how long?
There's no set time frame for
I'm voting against that. It's crazy.
Housing allowance.
You're paying the guy $284,000 a year, plus about another close to $50,000 for housing allowance. You're really talking about giving him another $320,000, $325,000, you know. Yeah, more than that.
But in defense, the one thing...
$4,000 a month, $12,000, $40,000. It's more than $22,000 per month. Just add it up. $42,000 a month. You're right. You're a good man. So you look.
There is one important fact, though, is the total package.
There is no important fact when you start doing things like that.
But there is one important fact. With respect to the total package, it is still below what is being paid other utilities, particularly other very large public utilities.
Yeah, you know what the difference is? We save this, so they're not bankrupt. They pay too much money at the top, and you'll be in the same position they are. He's getting more money than Mr. Deaton than you.
I don't come close to Mr. Deaton, so I'll sit way over here.
Well, you got a chair between the two of you.
There's a big chair.
The fact of the matter is that, Mr. Deaton, how can you sign off on this?
Because, as Mr. Bujob indicated, for public power general managers, those that have been successful, i.e. Salt River Project, etc., that the going rate is at least double this.
Mr. President.
And therefore, I think that both, this is at the top end, the salary amount is at the top end of the salary scale for this position, and the housing allowance just allows us to compensate him for this position, and I think it's within the appropriate levels.
You made the motion yet? Okay, I'll second Mr. Garcetti's motion. I mean, I think that if he took this job for less than what you're offering him today, is that correct? Yes or no? It's a temporary position. How long has he been there?
Several months, I forget.
What's that? 6, 8, 10 months? Something like that. How much did we pay him? How much was he getting? On what scale?
I believe he was being paid at the top of the scale.
What was that? I don't know.
The 284.
Well, I don't know if he's been paid 284 or not. You don't have the information before us.
Mr. Fujoka, I believe the question is what the differential is between what he's earned as an interim general manager and what you're asking us to approve
today. This is the same salary he earned as an interim general manager, including the housing allowance. There's no difference. The only difference was the recent cost of living increase that all employees received back in July. But other than that, it was, it's the same salary.
Also, just as an aside, the prior general manager also had a housing allowance.
So he's not getting any increase over what he's currently earning?
That's right, and also the housing allowance was also provided to Mr. Freeman when he was here.
Well, he got everything Ruth gave him, you know that, that's different.
I seem to recall that the council approved that.
Well, I didn't.
I seem to recall the council approving that.
Well, they did. And the point I'd like to make, one final question, is that he is currently earning this amount of money. Question, did we approve that as the council? Is earning this salary?
I believe so. It's all interim salaries.
Do you know, or do you just believe it? Do you know?
All interim salaries have to be approved by the
It was approved by the council. It was part of the motion to approve his interim, to extend his interim appointment.
Ms. Galanter.
I appreciate your consulting me on this because, as you know, I'm no longer a member of the EERC, and so I was not actually involved in the committee's discussions of salary. But remember that the mayor selects the general manager, and the mayor, I was part of the group that recommended to him that Mr. Wiggs be selected. The mayor has an interesting dilemma on his hands, as do we as a city as a whole, because as one of you just pointed out, the going rate for successful managers of power utilities, even the ones that don't also include water, is considerably higher than the salaries we offer. And so we have, over the last several years, in order not to set off an avalanche of requests for giant salary increases from other departments, our successive mayors have found a way to attract talent without having to raise the base salary, and we've now established that precedent. My concern is that at this point that I was not in the discussions between, nor was anyone else here, in the discussions between the mayor and Mr. Wiggs, or the commission and Mr. Wiggs when the deal was struck that results in his being selected, having agreed to take the permanent job. I think it would be unwise to try to back out of it at this point, because it will put us back through the, if he were to not stay as the permanent general manager because the total compensation was not as high as he's been getting, we'd have to go back to the interview pool. And let me tell you, I interviewed through several days of the interview pool, and we don't want to do that. It was not an encouraging experience. I think it's important that we pay him the salary, make sure he's doing the job, let him get at it. So I would urge support of my original motion to approve the EERC recommendation.
Thank you, Ms. Galanter. Mr. Deepa.
Mr. President, members of the council, it's also important that in this position, this is one of the more volatile things that are happening in this country, let alone the state or the city, and that's the power market. We've seen a major company fall from favor all the way from seventh largest company to bankruptcy in a matter of 1 year. And one thing that the department has not had over the last 10 to 15 years is stability. It has not had a person at the top for a continued period of time. Considering the amount of money we're talking about, considering what is at stake and what the alternatives, it's a no-brainer. This is the appropriate thing to do to try to keep Mr. Wiggs on, and the amount of money is just not, given what is at stake, is minor.
Mr. Brinson?
I just wonder, to me, the salary sounds out of proportion, to be very honest with you. And I'm not trying to second guess the ERC, and I recognize the fact this is a large organization and does require somebody with a lot of skills. However, I can understand a housing allowance on a interim type situation where somebody moves here temporarily to take this
tomar
position.
esta posición.
But for this to go on
Para esto, para seguir.
as part of his salary, this, I don't know if some of you are aware of this, but this brings this to over $320,000 a year, and it goes on forever.
Y sigue por siempre.
Plus, we'll be entertaining increases and so forth. Now, I think that in the face of what's going on, I think there ought to be some limitation.
Alguna limitación.
What was your motion to?
¿Cuál es su moción para?
Yeah, I'm inclined to possibly support that, or possibly if there were a compromise where we pay it for the first year until he gets located in a home or something, whatever the case. Did he buy a home already? Oh, okay, well, not even in the city, see? So, yeah, well, that doesn't, two wrongs don't make one right. Anyway, I respect the ERC's position. I'm going to think about it. But I do have some problems with the amount. I must tell you, it does concern me. Anybody that makes more money than Ron Deaton, I worry about. In fact, I worry about Ron Deaton, but you know.
I would worry about Ron Deaton as well, but Ron Deaton is also recommending that you do that, which is unusual, number one, because, as I stated, two things. One is that the going rate for these positions is double this.
Is it really?
And it is not as complicated.
But they just went out of business, Enron.
No. That's who wanted to buy us because they were so good. No, I'm talking about Salt River Project, Sacramento Municipal Utilities, actually organizations that are considerably less complicated on the power side and don't even have the water. And the water, quite frankly, in this state, since we've just watched on public television the Mark Twain, it seems, is saying about whiskey is for drinking and water is for fighting. The comment is appropriate today.
So hopefully for bathing also.
Pardon me?
Hopefully for bathing also.
The whiskey or the water? Anyway, you have a salary rate for these other organizations that we have to semi-compete with. I know everybody would love to come to work for the city of Los Angeles, but at some point when the salary is twice as much as in Utah, there's
but you got to live in Utah.
This is true. That's the differential, I guess.
These salaries are so great, why did this individual
and secondly, the organization,
not take some of these higher salaries someplace
and secondly, Mr. Burnson, the organization and what's at stake isn't anywhere near as important to them as it is to this city. We are in a very complex situation, in a very complex market.
I ask you, both of you, I'm going to ask you a bottom line question. I don't know Mr. Wiggs very well. I've only met him once or twice. And are you convinced that he has the capability to run this organization the way we would expect it? I'm going to ask you, both of you, just give me a yes or no answer.
Yes.
You are also?
Yes.
And you feel that the pay scale that is being offered is appropriate under these circumstances?
Especially given the market. And the other thing that must be considered...
For $42,000 a year housing, you could have had me, you know.
Like I said, you've got to consider the alternatives.
No, I didn't say that.
Could do worse. We've done worse in the past.
Mr. Councilman Burnson, in that context, I think Councilwoman Galanter referred to this. This is a highly qualified manager. During the selection process, I believe some of the other candidates did not have the same qualifications.
Okay, I'm gonna rely on my colleague, Ms. Galanter. I do trust her. I'm not so sure about Mr. Deaton, but I will rely upon both of your advice. I must tell you, though, it gives me pause when we start approving these kind of salaries.
Thank you, Mr. Brinson. Ms. Sikowski.
Thank you, Mr. Brinson. Let me add, in terms of your review and asking some critical bottom line questions, this is also recommended by the mayor, another person who needs to be and should be and is responsible both for the selection and this recommendation. And I think that is the bottom line. We are forgetting how well situated the Water and Power Department is and how well managed it has been, and we need to keep that high level. Just hearing that among other people who were competing, Mr. Wiggs' skills were far better than others who competed. And those skills are what in the open market, when competed for fairly, are earning double this salary. So although standing alone, this looks exorbitant and very, very high, again, we don't see the context in which it's placed in other municipalities. And Mr. Deaton is right. We've gone through the last couple of years focusing on energy and weathered that well, electricity and weathered that well. But the water issues that are going to be creeping up are going to be as substantial, if not more so. So we need someone with an incredible group of skills, an incredible, in fact, just yesterday, Mr. Zine and I in Personnel Committee had recommended already showing some restructuring in the department, that they are looking at creating positions that are going to focus on economic development, focus on corporate services, focus on the kinds of things that need to be competitive in this market and help our overall economy. So I think it's worth this salary, it's worth this effort, it was negotiated fairly. Bottom line, it's half what we would pay or what would be on the open market available in the other utilities, and I think we should support it.
Mr. Reyes.
It's reassuring to hear that the staff is presenting to the committee issues of economic development. With a price tag this high for personnel and expertise, and I understand it is relative to the industry, we do need to emphasize these strategies in economic development. Water is nourishing in many different ways. Trying to bring back some level of vitality, the greening of our corridors, especially in those neighborhoods we have a high level of children, a presence of schools that, and I do understand there's the green program where they're bringing trees into the schoolyards now, but we need to improve those programs. We need to expand them. We're kind of doing schools more like in a gunshot approach. We need to increase that more as a policy. So we need to go to the oxygenization of our corridors. We have the freeways, we have the main corridors coming in from traffic, and creating our buffer zones for the sound and the pollution that comes from our freeways. DWP is in a great position to stimulate those economic development strategies to do that, because it will bring back life to those corridors that have been dying over the past few years. So I'm using this opportunity to expand on that, because it's something that I'm going to keep pounding away in order for us to create those linkages between DWP and these neighborhoods that need those kinds of greening improvements and improving our corridors, our parkways, and bringing trees to our schools. Thank you.
Ms. Hahn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm actually rising in support of this package that's been offered to Mr. Wiggs. And while I appreciate the debate this morning, and clearly we're in a tough time in our city, and we're down here talking all the time about the hard times that many of our residents have fallen on, particularly those who are been involved with the airport and the travel industry. It's tough to approve this kind of package knowing that there's many of our constituents who are hurting or having a hard time. But I must support those of my colleagues who have said, you know, we've already been in negotiation with Mr. Wiggs. This is a package that he's agreed upon. And again, we are a municipally owned utility, and we are in a great spot. And we have attracted someone who we believe is capable and very qualified to continue to protect our assets and lead us into the future and remain the most solid utility really probably in the country right now. And let's remember, when we attract people from Texas, well, everybody wants to live in Los Angeles. It's much more expensive to live here, particularly Newport Beach. And housing is much more expensive than in some of our other parts of the country. So I think even at this level, even with this housing allowance and even with the base salary package that we've offered him, it's my understanding that he would still be the lowest paid executive of a utility company, particularly a water and a power company in the country. So we're always talking about how Los Angeles wants to act like a business. We want to attract good people to run our businesses here, so this is a good example. And let's remember, in the new charter, our general managers are much more accountable. Never before have general managers been in the position where they could be fired by the mayor for any cause that the mayor so deems. So we're bringing these people in to run our departments, knowing that they're really in a vulnerable situation in terms of the new city charter. Also, our neighborhood councils have now been given the authority to rate our general managers. They're going to be a part of any salary increase that we give our general managers in the future. Neighborhood councils will be able to judge their performance. So I think we're, as the Bible says, to whom much is given, much is required. So we're going to be giving a very decent package to this general manager, but in return, much is going to be required of him. And as Ed says, we're going to depend on them to really help us with economic development. And when we go to the department asking for help on employees who've been laid off and our residents who've been having a hard time, we expect him to give back. In terms of relief for utility bills. So I'm actually standing in approval of the entire package.
Thank you. Mr. Pacheco.
Mr. President, colleagues, I simply want to start by asking if when we're talking about personnel and contract negotiations, is this something that's better suited for a closed session versus an open session? That's all. I want to make sure that if we're going to get into the nitty-gritty, we might want to hold it on the desk for a closed session after we're done with the regular agenda.
Madam City Attorney.
City Attorney?
I didn't hear what you said. You want to go into closed session on that?
I'm just asking, is that an option even available to us, considering we're discussing?
Yes, under the employment negotiations, yes.
Okay. I know it's not required, but
is that a motion?
I would move that we hold this on the desk and go into a closed session at the conclusion of the regular agenda.
And take it up with the rest of the closed session items?
And take it up with the rest of the closed session items.
Okay, I have a number of members still wishing to be heard on this item. Let me go through the list and ask if you want to make your comments or ask your questions in open session or reserve them for the closed session discussion. Mr. Ridley Thomas.
Did you call, Mr. President?
Did you wish to be heard now or in closed session on this item?
Oh, I wish for us to dispose of this matter in the appropriate manner. It would seem to me that that would be with dispatch. The point I want to make is that a range of opinions have been expressed, and we respect those respective opinions. But it is without question that a lot of thought has been given to the salary schedule and its placement on it. And it would seem to me, having heard the varying views of members who wish to comment on this, it is time to move the item forward, and I would so move.
Okay.
Okay.
Ms. Makowski.
Is, however we vote as to whether or not go into closed session or not, we are joined by the Deputy Mayor, Tim McCosker, and I just wondered if we wanted to take, if Tim wanted to share something with us now rather than deferring it and having him come back later.
Well, while on the remainder of my time, Mr. President, members of the council, it would seem to me going into closed session would make sense if there was a matter deemed appropriately proprietary as it relates to legal implications and or personnel matters that would lead to such. We've had a relatively full airing of the issue in open session, and to the extent that that is the case, it would be superfluous at best to go into closed session at this time. The only thing remaining to do, it would seem to me, is to vote to adopt the committee's report as it is before us, or to vote to reject it. I move that we proceed with the vote, Mr. President.
Well, everybody else on the
And then there are some
queue.
young people who are wishing to be acknowledged in the audience, and so when you permit me to do so, I think we'll all be pleased to greet them.
Okay, let's resolve the fate of this item. Everybody else on the queue, Mr. Garcetti, Mr. Zine, Mr. Holden, Ms. Galanter, Mr. Pacheco have all been heard at least once before. Mr. McCosker, did you wish to make any comments at this time?
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I would just say briefly that as a member of the group that conducted the interviews and worked with the search team, Mr. Wiggs was found to be exceptionally well qualified. And I think it was the unanimous choice of the entire team that while we had a number of excellent candidates, he was so exceptionally well qualified that we urged the EERC and urged this council to make the appointment. And on behalf of the mayor, I would say we thought it was also beneficial to the city and to the ratepayers of the Department of Water and Power to be able to make the offer to Mr. Wiggs, carrying over the exact compensation that he now receives. And the mayor would urge you, as Council Member Ridley Thomas has, to move this with dispatch. Thank you.
Mr. Garcetti, a point of clarification.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me clarify, because I kind of stirred up some of this trouble in the first place. Let me clarify where I'm coming from on this. I want Mr. Wiggs, I believe he's the right person for this, and I trust the ERC to negotiate this. With one caveat, I think that if we put in, in my short time on the ERC when I first came on council, and rightfully so, there was a strong focus on parity, that what we do with one unit or one type of general manager will be looked at elsewhere. I understand that with Mr. Freeman and Mr. Wiggs, when they came from out of town, that housing subsidy made sense. I would rather see the ERC come back and say, look, we're going to lose them if we don't get the same amount in cash, in salary, but take away a housing subsidy, especially right now when we have a housing crisis. Symbolism from the city, I think, is important, but also the precedent in terms of what this does for other general managers when they come back to us. Does that mean the next time we renegotiate with the port, with the airport, they're going to be saying, well, there's a housing subsidy here and there's been for 2 now. It's a matter of principle and an important principle. So for me, it's not to take away this much money and lose him. It's to do it the right way and to set the right precedent. So that's where I'm coming from, and I ask my colleagues to support that. I'd be willing to have this go back to the ERC for recommendation of just a salary different from this, absent the housing subsidy.
Okay, we now have 3 motions before us. The first is to approve.
And I'll withdraw the previous motion.
Which motion is that, Mr. Garcetti?
To approve without the housing subsidy.
Okay, so we have 2 motions before us. One is to approve the contract as negotiated, and the other is now the motion to enter closed session on this item. Let's take a vote first on whether or not to go into closed session.
All right.
If that... We're calling for a vote on whether or not to go into closed session.
Yeah.
Okay, and if that doesn't pass, then we can continue with the queue or take a vote on the matter.
No, you're not cutting off debate.
Not yet. There hasn't been a motion to call the question. Please open the roll on whether or not to go into closed session.
I vote.
Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
6 ayes, 8 noes.
Okay, so it remains an open session, and we'll continue with the discussion. Mr. Garcetti, did you wish to be heard again?
Vote no. I think there's something wrong with this.
Okay, I
was trying to vote no.
Anyway, it doesn't change the outcome.
Mr. Holden, keep your hand off Mr. LeBon's button, please.
Mr. Zine is the next speaker.
Off his button.
Mr. Zine.
Thank you, Mr. President, colleagues. I know my time is running. I know the issue appears not to be the qualifications of the general manager, but the housing allowance. And there's been debate back and forth. What if we took a simple solution, which was brought to me by someone in the audience, to how to fold it together, not to send it back to EERC, but just to fold it together, remove the housing, term housing, and throw that into the pot for the compensation and move forward with that. Is that okay, Mr. D?
You're saying does not have a housing allowance and raise the salary?
Raise the salary, which would be the compensation of the housing.
You're at the top you're at the top of the salary level right now. What you can do, if you'd like to do something like that, is recommend that the CAO bring back to the mayor and the council a proposal, but in the meantime approve the one with the housing allowance, and then we can raise, in essence, raise the salary for the general manager.
I think the issue, as illustrated by, stated by Councilmember Garcetti, which I support, is we don't want to set a precedence where people come in from out of town and now they're getting the salary plus the housing, which sets a bad precedence. But the compensation, I think, is appropriate since we're getting a deal with Mr. Wiggs. He's doing a fine job, and if we're talking that housing subsidy, fold it in and leave it at that. So however we can.
I think that if you approved what's before you today and simultaneously recommend that the CAO review this and come back with a salary, a review of the salary for the general manager, we could take that into account. But in order to provide what was negotiated with Mr. Wiggs up to this point, I think you have to approve what's before you, but you can do simultaneously the other action.
And then how long would it take to come back with the new salary?
I think that the
do that very quickly.
Fairly quick, but I think that they need to survey current salaries, et cetera, and it'll probably take a couple, 3 months.
Well, see, the only problem is I don't see us objecting to the salary. The compensation for the housing is the issue.
I understand, but if you do that and then you alternate the salary, you can then eliminate the housing allocation 3 to 4 months from now and raise the salary, and I don't think Mr. Wiggs cares how he gets it.
It would be the same amount of money.
Then we'd be the same number, roughly, if that survey comes out. It could be more.
The mayor would support that option of approving this package now and directing this with the CAO's report to come back with a salary survey, and certainly we would be interested in seeing the report, having that go to ERC and then come to the council.
That way we cover his salary for the next few months while we proceed with that, and then come back and clean it up so we don't set a precedence of a housing allowance for general managers to come in from other states.
Right.
That would be my motion, Mr. President. Thank you.
Mr. Holden. Oh, before Mr. Holden speaks, Mr. Rudy Thomas for an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the council. We're delighted to have in the chambers today the Oakwood Academy. These students are on a field trip. There are 20 of them. They are here visiting Los Angeles City Hall to see local government at its best. These are students, grades 4 through 6. The teacher, Ms. Cameron Green, and Mr. Kurt Henry. And after leaving City Hall, they will be touring El Pueblo as a part of their curriculum on early California history. These students are using public transportation via the Blue Line and Red Lines of the light rail system to arrive and depart from the city. Let's welcome these young people from the Oakwood Academy. Give them a big round of applause. Thank you, and welcome to City Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Rudy Thomas. Mr. Holden.
Mr. Dean, we asked you some questions and you talk about, I think, I'm not sure. The question is this: how much was it? Didn't this individual come from Sacramento? Mr. Wiggs? Yes or no? He came from Sacramento.
No, he didn't. No, actually,
he told me he worked in Sacramento.
He did.
All right, did he work in it?
But he did not come from Sacramento. He worked for El Paso Electric during a particularly severe financial problem they had. He was the president of that corporation.
How much money
he worked in Sacramento.
How much money was he earning in his last job? You should know that.
Though I don't know how much he made as a consultant to the Assembly Speaker. That was what he was.
Assembly Speaker?
He was in Sacramento.
$200,000 less than what you're offering him a year.
He was a consultant when the state was having a financial crisis.
Let me tell you something.
Power crisis.
You offering him twice as much money as you paying the mayor of this city. You offering him maybe just a little less than what you're paying the President of the United States of America. So don't give me this job equivalency, and the pay should be based on that. You have general managers here who've been doing a standing job, a lot of responsibility, and their salaries don't come close to what you're offering this guy. He would take this job for $100,000 less. Why give him $100,000 more? I mean, he has no place to go. You start him out at the very top, and you admit that. This is absolutely absurd. Is he more important than the mayor of the city of Los Angeles that people trusted this city to lead them? No. Did they ever stand the test? No. Did they ever make a pledge or a commitment to the people of this city? No. The mayor did, and each and every one of you did. When is this nonsense going to stop? Even Freeman was not entitled to it. Sold Mojave Desert, sandbagged us, as far as I'm concerned, some of those deals. And now am I right? You were on the
No, he didn't sell the desert, he sold the power plant.
Well,
just to clarify. The power plant, and you and I agreed on that, as I recall. My point is that elected offices, their salaries, run a different scheme nationwide. And you point out the President of the United States makes less than comparable positions in the private sector.
My statement is this.
But when they leave,
nothing Mr. Weeks has done since he left being a consultant to the speaker, whomever, what he did there, to now, that would warrant him to receive close to $200,000 more than he's receiving there in benefits.
I think the relevant experience, Mr. Holden, is that
he has not earned that, Mr. D, and we should not pay him that. And the taxpayers are being ripped off on this deal. And the other general managers are not being treated fairly. The commission and the status of women general managers earn less than $75,000 a year. Been in the job for a number of years, you're giving her no consideration, and she deserves it also. You don't show that kind of compassion and support for other general managers in the city of Los Angeles. It's not fair.
The difference between, for example, the executive director of status of women is that that's actually a represented class as opposed to an exempt class.
Thank you. Ms. Galanda.
I just want to make a couple of points here. I'm willing to support the idea of having the CAO come back with a survey. I just don't want to commit us in advance to paying the salary that the CAO discovers is average for large public power agencies, because I will tell you something, we can't afford it. And I predict that with confidence. So if it will relieve everybody's mind to have that survey, by all means we should have the survey. I do want once again to urge approval of the package that was brought to us by the mayor and the EERC, of which the mayor is a member. And the reason is that I want to remind you that DWP really has been and will be a major part of our economic development strategy. It's because we kept the lights on that we have something to market that many other localities in California do not. And keeping the lights on in the future is going to be as important as it was in the past. We also have, through the department, a whole series of economic programs in which community-based organizations are hiring and training people to provide information and services directly to people throughout the city. They are doing a fabulous job. They are developing a whole new group of people who, with management skills, service skills. They can do more of this, but they are doing a lot. They are doing more than any other single department in this city. And we should be very proud of them, and we should be making sure that we hire somebody who can keep that up. I also think it's important to remember that they transfer money to us every year directly. We get money out of the for the general fund, out of the Department of Water and Power, based on how much money they make. We need to have a competent manager over there. And Mr. McCosker and I were both in the interview panel, and I certainly want to concur and say again that of all the people we interviewed, there was no question that Mr. Wiggs is the person we need to have here. So I would urge you to approve the EERC package, get the survey from the CAO, and then let's look at the survey and decide. That can go to who gets that, EERC, I guess, and take a look at what comparable salaries are. Let us all know, and I think it will be a very rude awakening, but certainly we should find it out. So I hope that we will approve this thing today and not extend the uncertainty that has existed at DWP since Freeman decided to run for the Assembly. And it was another year that he was still here while everybody was waiting for him to leave. There was the time that Mr. Wiggs was here as an interim. We need a permanent general manager who has the authority to direct the place. An interim person really is not sufficient for that. So I would certainly once again urge approval.
Mr. Pacheco.
Mr. President, colleagues, when I first reviewed this in ERC, I voted against the proposal, primarily because I thought that it just wasn't fair to add a housing allotment after the fact. But having thought about it a little more, I really thought, I've come to the conclusion now that instead of looking at it as a negative, that we have an opportunity here to reinforce a practice where we can be very flexible. So that if we really, really want someone, no matter what the salary range says, we can go outside of it and augment it and include a housing allotment so that if we really want someone to be our general manager, we have that flexibility. So I kind of look at today as a vote for flexibility and giving this opportunity to get whoever's the best qualified and the best candidate. So looking at the salary range won't necessarily be a discouraging factor for any of the more qualified individuals that we're aware of who sometimes hesitate taking government jobs because they don't pay as well. Here we have an opportunity to tell someone that don't worry about what the salary range says because we can always augment your pay by giving you a housing allotment. I think that kind of flexibility is something that we should all have. You never know what kind of professional we may want. For example, I noticed that the salary range for the general manager at El Pueblo is lower than most of the salary ranges for general managers in the city of Los Angeles. But I now know that if I wanted a highly qualified professional who's working in the private sector, that the salary range won't necessarily dictate how much they get paid because I can always in negotiations offer a housing allotment and maybe bring in some of those highly trained and professional Latinos that are out there working in corporate America. So I'm going to vote for this today because it really empowers me and gives me flexibility when we start looking for general managers in other departments because the salary range doesn't necessarily control or dictate or limit my options. So I'm going to support this today for that reason.
Mr. Willie Thomas.
Previous question on the whole nine, Mr. President.
Previous question has been moved. We have one speaker remaining. Madam Clerk, please open the roll on the previous question. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
That motion carries. That ends discussion. Madam Clerk,
There's before us. A motion by Councilmember Zine requesting the requesting that this matter be approved today and that the CAO be requested to review salaries and bring back a proposal to the EERC.
I believe that's accepted as a friendly amendment. So we don't need a vote on that. Let's take a vote on the entire matter as amended. Please open the roll. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
12 ayes, 2 noes.
That is approved. Forthwith. Next item, please.
Next item, Mr. President, item number 27 is on the desk. That's called special by Councilmember Weiss, and I believe there's a card from the public on the matter.
Point of information, Mr. President.
Mr. Willie Thomas.
Who were the two noes on that matter?
We can have an instant replay tonight at 7 o'clock.
Oh, Mr. Holden and Mr. Garcetti. Mr. Holden and Mr. Garcetti. May the Lord bless you.
Item number 27, now before us, public hearing has not been held, and we do have members of the public wishing to be heard on this item. At this point in time, the council calls forward Mr. Mort Allen to be followed by Joan Lux.
My basic question on this, which I'm going to ask Cal Burns and Cindy, is this was passed last June 5th to require permits and everything. And I don't understand how we have a new motion instead of enforcing the existing motion that was to do the same thing. And I'm also concerned because the last 4 lines says if it's not feasible. We've been trying to get the billboards permitted and registered for, I guess, 3 years now. And we keep on passing these things, then nothing happens to it. I think that it's gotten way out of hand in the newspapers. I don't know how many of you have seen. Today there's a whole bunch of stories. It's like, it's blown the whole city out of proportion. The lobbyists are making $10 million, and this whole thing, when it should be so simple, I don't understand why each council office can't just inventory the billboards that are in their district and then have the building department check and see if they've got permits. It's like this whole thing is just letting more and more billboards stay up that are illegal.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Ms. Lux?
Thank you very much. I'm speaking on behalf of Cahuenga Pass Neighborhood Association that is adjacent to Freeway, and I do support the comment that was in the LA Times today, and think in addition to the fact that we need to insist on an inventory of all existing legal and non-legal signs, and the barcode that Councilman Weiss and Cindy Mizikowski and Eric Garcetti are recommending in their motion, I think it's totally appropriate to ask for an annual fee. Number one, it's a source of money that we could use right now. Number two, they're making plenty of it. And if they can afford to give millions to for various people, elected offices that are running for offices, they can certainly afford to do this. And to, at the very least, get down the billboards that are illegal. But an annual fee is almost a no-brainer, and it should be insisted on for maintenance and for being able to maintain the inventory of it, and to also maintain those that are illegal. Please, I recommend that this go forward, the motion, and that we add an annual fee to the ordinance request. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This concludes public comment on item 27. Members wishing to be heard, Mr. Weiss.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this is, and I understand from discussions with my colleagues that some things that are contained in this motion and in the amending motion, which should be on your desk shortly, have been the subject of prior discussion in this council, but we never seem to get anything done in this city on billboards. And people are frustrated. People are right to be frustrated. There's a lot of discussion about what we're going to do in the future, about future billboards. Will they be swapped? Will they be banned? Will they be permitted? Well, all of this discussion is well and good, but we haven't paid attention to the problem that we will still have, regardless of which of these future proposals pass or don't pass, which is which billboards in the city are legal, which are illegal, and what can we do about it? How can we get a handle on this problem? And so the motion that we put before you, and that Mr. Garcetti and Ms. Mizikowski have supported, and I appreciate their support, will fundamentally do the following. It will put the burden on the billboard companies where it should be to come forward to this city and tell us what billboards they have and provide us with the inventory. You know, we've put the burden on this city for too long. We put the burden on City Department of Building and Safety to try to get a handle on the number of billboards in this city, which are illegal and which are illegal. And the reality is the billboard companies have been running a power play against us. We have been outmanned consistently throughout every period. Well, we need to change that. And this motion and the amendment before you today attempt to change that, because it puts the burden on the billboard companies to come forward and tell us what billboards they have. It will also direct the CLA and the city attorney to come up with a funding mechanism so that it's the billboard companies and not the public that bear the burden of funding this. I ask for another minute. My time's not out. we also need to come up with a system in the future so that we know which billboards are legal and which are illegal. The system that is proposed in this motion is a barcode system or something like a barcode system, so that once the billboard companies comply with this new ordinance and tell us which billboards they have and what the basis for their permit is, we'll be able to affix some sort of barcode or identifying information on the side of the billboards or on the posts, so that building and safety inspectors can more readily and quickly tell which are legal and which are illegal. And finally, we will set up really the first dedicated cadre of building and safety inspectors dedicated to the issue of billboard blight. We haven't had that. We've been outmanned, we've been outgunned, and we've been outmuscled. This is our chance to take action today, which will be meaningful action, which we can implement shortly, which can finally get a handle on this key question of which billboards are legal, which are illegal. I ask for your support.
Mr. Burns.
Well, I'm certainly going to support it, but I can tell you that there are many, many problems, Jack, that you're not aware of, and reasons why we have so many illegals, because building and safety simply was not able to cope with it or do their job. And I'm not blaming the current system. Unfortunately, the billboard industry has tremendous influence in Sacramento. They have legislation which protects them. We can't take down their billboards. They even have legislation which was passed, which I believe we're going to test, and I hope we will, that says that any illegal board that's been there for over 5 years is deemed to be legal, even though it was put up illegally. The only problem I have with the barcode is I don't know how you determine that. I know that you use a scanner in the market. I would prefer to see some sort of a permanent notice on the sign itself that says who owns the sign, the permit number, a copy of it, and who the owner of the property that it sits on. I mean, I would hopefully that would be a friendly amendment to put that on there, so the public can be aware of that as well, and it can be easily identified. Just let me finish, then you can make a reply. Let me just, for the record, I want to correct something. One of the newspapers, the Daily News, carried a story in which they condemned me for appointing Mr. Spiker to a task force dealing with all signs. We dealt with the super graphics, with billboards. I might add, and they said this was a conflict of interest because the ordinance on the freeway signs was before us. That's not correct. The freeway ordinance sign was not sent to the, in fact, I sent it directly to the Plum Committee so that it would be handled separately and there would be no conflict in that particular thing. It is appropriate for members of industry, business, and homeowners to be involved when you study how the disposition of something is going to be. We need to do a number of things with billboards. Number one, we need to start testing the law on taking down the illegal boards, and there are probably at least 30% of all the boards in Los Angeles or more may be illegal. Second of all, I have initiated legislation which has a current ICO which was just renewed, so there are no permits being issued at all now. The committee, the task force will be coming forth with recommendations, one of which I'm sure may be to entirely ban billboards, any new billboards in the city of Los Angeles. That's a distinct possibility of what may happen. We need to deal with the existing ones, and we need to deal with the court decisions that have gone against us, such as the 500 feet on alcoholic beverages. That's ridiculous. So anyway, a lot of work is being done. I'm happy to support the motion, but we need the ability to enforce it. That's the key. We can do all the kind of legislation we want, but if we don't have the ability to enforce it, and we're not willing to go to court and fight these other laws that are made in Sacramento as to their constitutionality, then we're going to be back where we are. But I admire your spirit on this thing, and I'm supportive of it.
Thank you.
If I could just briefly respond on the amendment. I do take it as a friendly amendment. It's not necessary because the motion doesn't call for a barcode and nothing else. It calls for a barcode or something similar, something along the lines you're talking about would be acceptable, and CLA is going to participate with the city attorney to come up.
Does the motion require all the billboard companies to present a list of their boards in the city to us?
Yes.
But the problem we've had with that, Jack, is where we tell you that safety doesn't have records of some of this stuff.
Okay.
I mean, they've only kept them for...
Ms. Misikowski.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just had the staff pull up, and Mr. Burns will remember this, and others who were part of this debate. The last time the council debated this was June 1st, just 6 months ago. That item says, request the city, this was acted on, the council approved it, request the city attorney to draft an ordinance requiring that billboards in the city be required to display a valid billboard permit on the pole of each billboard in an area easily visible by an inspector. Council ordered that, requested the city attorney to draft that ordinance to bring it back. That is owed us, that is due, they are responsible for that. That wasn't the only thing the council did. The council directed the Building and Safety Department and the Planning and Land Use Management and Budget and Finance Committees to look at recommendations to create a yearly billboard registration fee for all billboards, including an analysis of Prop 218 requirements. That's the issue, how far our fees can go, how they have to be related to what they're doing. That fee shall be used by the Department of Building and Safety to inspect all billboards yearly and for any enforcement actions necessary. So we asked already that the departments look at a fee, create that fee structure and come back, so that after the requirement of the posting of the signs be done, that we have the fee structure to hire the inspectors to do this regularly, and that is owed us. This was a 6 month ago action, along with a lot of others that I'm not reading the whole 2 pages of actions, but this is on the right track. So I have no problem supporting this today, and maybe what we should do is ask for a report back by the agencies from where this has been for 6 months, because it also is tied into all the other things we talked about. But these were motions that we were looking at, we need to look further, and we need to get the answer. Mr. Weiss is right, it takes too long around here to get something done. That was something where we had consensus on it. Often it gets put aside while other things are being done, but that is a request. It should be, we should have that report back, and there was at least 3 different committees required to look at it. But let's get a report back. I have no problem with 27A, as that goes to committee, to say, what does it take to start? Looking at funding, looking at enforcement. Building and safety is here, and members of the council, let me tell you, it's very, very expensive. This amount of a group of inspectors to just start an inventory is just that. It's an inventory. It's not enforcement. The whole enforcement package that Building and Safety presented to us when we had this discussion was it would be about a $3 million a year package to have the inspectors, once we have these coded, once we have these required, to enforce it, to do it, and to follow up, because it is a big issue, I think. I think the good thing about this debate today is that it's worth having again. It's worth looking at all the other issues and seeing where the consensus is, where the focus, where the momentum is in the city as we look at this issue, at this industry. I think Mr. Burnson did make something, an important statement. And as those of us who looked at it over the last couple of years, state legislation says even if we find an illegal billboard, and it's been there for more than 5 years, it is legal today. State legislation. And that, so we need to do even more. And I'm happy to have this brought back. I think as we have it, the studies brought back from and we should have, so let me ask that this be put on the agenda of the City Council, make the motion in 2 weeks, 14 days. Let's get all the departments, Building and Safety, the City Attorney, and the Planning Department, who were directed to do a number of things 6 months ago, and get that status report and what they are ready to tell us in 2 weeks from today.
Thank you. Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Councilmember Misikowski, for adding those succinct motions to have those reports back. I also want to praise Councilmember Weiss for his leadership on this, and I'm a proud seconder. You know, I was talking with Councilmember Mizikowski about this, and when we go to community meetings, I'm sure everybody could give the same story. There's few issues that when you talk about cause more anger and arouse more ire for Los Angeles residents than billboards. You can talk about potholes, you can talk about policing, you can talk about everything, and you get on billboards and people's temperature just rises. Everybody feels like we have not been getting the answers that we need, the action that we need. We can tell them, well, the billboards have property rights, and people say, well, that's just not good enough. That is not good enough to hear that. And then we have to come together and require the state legislators that represent the same people that we do come together and begin to look at some of the legislation that has passed in recent years and why those property rights are. Some of the issues are constitutional, but some of them are not, and why they have been able to do what they've been able to. Then we tell them we don't have enough inspectors. Again, the public says that's not good enough. And today I think we not only have moved on the inventory, but also on ways of getting the inspectors, and we have to look at fees. And this is not unreasonable for the billboard industry to do. I mean, if you look at the profits that the billboard industry has made over the last decade, they've gone up exponentially, and yet we have not shared in that. The people of Los Angeles have not shared at all in those profits. And then when we say, well, we can't tell you where the billboards even are, I don't think that's just a problem the city has. I think it's a problem the billboard companies themselves have if you look at how some of them are kept up, especially in the poorer areas of this city. When I drive home, you know, I see probably 3 or 4 peeling billboards, even when there's not rain, in my own neighborhood in Echo Park. The city attorney has showed real leadership at the beginning of this year in helping us stop, and Councilmember Bernson's leadership as well, stop those billboards that were going to go up on MTA Caltrans property. I think he will want to continue that leadership here and come back with that ordinance that was asked for 6 months ago. We've all settled in now. We all are here. There's a new city attorney and new city council. It is time for us to act. I look forward to that 2-week deadline, and I thank you again, Councilmember Weiss, for your leadership.
Ms. Hahn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, first of all, I want to say that I thank our colleague, Councilwoman Mizikowski, for bringing up the issue of what happened 6 months ago. That is a whole other debate in this city, which I find absolutely one of the more frustrating parts about our job is that we make motions, we pass ordinances, we direct staff, we ask for reports, and unless someone happens to remember and ask their staff to pull up what was it that we did on June 1st. These things are languishing all over the city of Los Angeles. This is part of why people think our city is too large. This is why a lot of people think our government is not accountable, it is not efficient, it is not responsive. I found something just yesterday where one of the first things I did in my first week here in office, directed a city department to do something. They had no clue until we pulled up the council file from that day to say, yes, indeed, we moved, we passed, we directed. Where do these things languish unless somebody remembers it? And that, my friends, is totally unacceptable in the city. And that's a whole other issue of the things that are languishing in some committee, that there's been some motion directing some report that will never get done unless we remember it, and that's unacceptable. But on to the billboards. While I support us getting a handle on this, I want somebody here to explain to me today, it's one thing for billboard companies to voluntarily tell us where their legal billboards are located. What makes us think they are going to voluntarily tell us where their illegal billboards are located? And if in fact, by the amending motion that we're actually going to try to approve hiring of more building and safety inspectors to help us with this inventory, how can you tell me today that we will be able to locate the illegal ones if they're not volunteering that information? And as Councilman Burton said, sometimes our own Department of Building and Safety doesn't have the records on what's legal and what's not legal. I think that's a problem. The other thing I'm wondering is, when we find these illegal billboards, I know that's another issue. What will we do? Is there a fine? Unfortunately, it sounds like if they've been there long enough, they're legal. Should we also include in this maybe some sort of an amnesty like an overdue library book, to get them, if they voluntarily tell us of a billboard that we find to be illegal versus not coming forth with that information and us discovering it on another way. I think that would be an incentive, because I think our main goal here, as you said, is to inventory. We want to know what's out there, what's legal, what's illegal, and then what we're going to do about it. So I think if we think these illegal billboards are going to be voluntarily offered up to us as their direct location, I think that's a problem. So I'd be interested in something where we actually can go easy on them, perhaps if they voluntarily give that information.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Mr. D.
Mr. President, might explain and civilian safety can enlarge upon it if you'd like, but basically what they've indicated to me is that the illegal billboards are primarily ones that have permits in which there are not, they're not conforming to the permit. And that permit, in large part, many of these billboards are microfiche, the permits. And so it's a combination of locating for an inspector to go identify the billboard, go back into the records, look at what the permit is, and then go back out and make sure that it is in conformance with the permit. What we have in the records, the trouble is that they're not easily accessible, and it'll be very complicated, and that's why it's such a high cost. Once having the inventory on some sort of database and have the permit, etc., and knowing what the legal status is at this point, then we will be able to administer it, I think, in a very reasonable fashion. It's that upfront cost of trying to get the inventory, get the actual permit that is probably more than likely on microfiche, not on a database since 1997. I think most of them are on a computerized system. And so anything prior to that, which is most of these, would have to be gathered in an entirely different fashion, and that's why it's so the front-end costs are so much. But if they're not conforming to the permit, either the billboard is too large, its juxtaposition on the property or is incorrect or lighted in the wrong fashion or something, all has to be physically verified by an inspector. There's no easy way of getting there.
Mr. Pacheco.
Mr. President, colleagues, as we review billboards in general, I just want to bring to everyone's attention one different dynamic. I get the sense that everyone's talking about billboards and they focus on the big monster billboards that they see on the freeway or on the major boulevards. I just want you to know that in CD14, our experience is not those billboards, primarily because I represent an older part of the city. Some parts of the area that I represent predate freeways. So a lot of the billboards I have to deal with are the smaller billboards that are on the side of buildings, and primarily some corridors are actually on the front lawns of some residences. So you have a home where people live, and in their front lawn they have a billboard, the smaller, it's called a single sheet. So I just want you to know that whatever we do on this issue, that is the prevailing problem in my district. And we did a survey over a couple hours, and my staff was able to locate 583 billboards in the district in less than 8 hours. So if, also it was brought to my attention that buildings, the vendors place online the location of all the billboards so that anyone interested in buying space will know what's available and what's out there. So I'm not so sure if the problem here is locating them, because I think we can locate them physically. I think it's this little nuance about if it's illegal because it doesn't conform technically, or if it's illegal because it's not permitted at all in terms of not having any paperwork. That may be very time-consuming and cost us some money. And finally, as we discuss this issue, I think if we went to the voters and asked them to assess a city tax on the revenue, I'm not sure if it would be on the property owner who's receiving the income or the billboard industry who's receiving the profit. But I think we went to the voters right now and asked them to put a tax on that for maintenance, for anti-graffiti programs, for the billboards, okay, not outside the billboard. And just dealing with the legality and illegality of the billboards. I wouldn't be surprised if the voters supported us in going in that direction so we can clean up the whole situation. I personally would love to remove those little tiny billboards off the front lawns of some of the homes in my district.
Mr. Labange.
Mr. President, members of council, I like what Jack White spoke of. I like what Cindy Misikowski spoke of in her work in the past. I like what Janice spoke of. The fact that it hasn't been addressed, and I listened to what Hal spoke of as far as this issue and its complication. One of our problems as a team, as a city council, is that we have to focus on things to move the ball down the field to score for the community. Okay, and we have to call the right play in order to do that, in order to score. But we have to keep pressure on ourselves so that it comes back here at the table. What Nick Pacheco just said, 583 boards in 2 hours. I know all our staffs, if we go through our districts, we can do a survey rather quickly to find out what is right and what is wrong, and to focus on that, and we need to do that. But Mr. Pacheco also stated that they sell these signboards, these single sheets, big sheets, whatever they are, and they also list, so as an advertiser, you know to drive down 4th Street or drive down Cesar Chavez or drive down Sunset Boulevard, you'll see where that sign's going to be located. The information is there. For the big and overwhelming boards that get generated by the Department of Water and Power, electricity to light them up, DWP has a location of that because I'm sure they bill that board person directly. That information is obtainable for building and safety and others, but we have to do that and focus on it. We have to do that and focus on it, and we have to select the parts of the city that we think it's appropriate to have signage that does not overwhelm us. We are not Irvine, California. We are Los Angeles, California, and there is great diversity here and great diversity of our urban scene. But we don't want it to overwhelm us. In my neighborhood on Hyperion Avenue, there's a big board, and they put in big, powerful lights that you see in this council chamber, and they light up on the whole hillside that they do complain to the city, to building and safety, to get them cited. I asked them to change it, and the representative, the owner of the board, did not give me a nice answer at all. Asked to friendly little change those light bulbs. So building and safety is out to cite them to bring that power down. I think this is real important, but I also think, Mr. Weiss, to ask for a friendly amendment to direct the CLA to survey the other cities around Los Angeles, because the pressure is on us, because other cities have banned boards completely. So what is the industry doing? They're running to Los Angeles. And it becomes overwhelming to us, and it overwhelms our community. So ask for a friendly amendment to survey the city through the League of Cities, what is happening around the 19 cities that border Los Angeles and the 88 cities in the county and Southern California area. I just would rise to support this action all the way from Cindy through Jack. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Labange. Mr. Reyes.
Council President, colleagues, I've been listening to this discussion, and I strongly feel we need to take this even further. I strongly feel that in the communities where I represent, for example, on San Fernando Road and Division, Eagle Rock, where they meet, we've got these, I think we have 4 giant-sized billboards that could probably double up as a drive-in theater. I mean, these are huge. And I have the tiny ones also all around it. And when we look at profit margins, we're looking at how much money these companies are making. I see no reason why we cannot, part of a fee of registration, is also take a percentage of their profit so that we can reinvest in the areas where they're being put up. If they're going to remain there, if the state makes us or prevents us from moving them, why can't we get a percentage of that profit and use that money for that local ballpark, that local nonprofit, that local school, so they can buy kids' uniforms for their sports, equipment, keeping up the fields, all the things we can't seem to do as a city because of our shortages. You have a wealth of money that's flowing through these boards. So I just want to take this even further. We're going to go through all this work and getting a lined up where the permits are at, when were they permitted, did they last longer than 5 years, they've been there longer than 5 years, therefore they're entitled to stay because of the state law. I mean, we really need to take this to another level because of the blight that's being created. On Cypress Avenue, you literally see, as Councilman Pacheco was saying, these little billboards every 4 to 5 houses in certain stretches, right on the lawns of these corridors. And it just blows you away. And it's, how can they get away with this? So bottom line is, we need to understand how much money is being made here, how much money is being profited, and why not look at that as a percentage to extract from it in order to deal with the mitigation of this blight and deal with the improvements of our neighborhoods. Thank you.
Mr. Zani.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, Councilmember Reyes talked about money. Infinity Decor is going to put up street furniture, toilets. They promised us $150 million minimum over a 20-year period of time, so there's no question they're making a ton of money. I understand there's a billboard task force that was established, and I would also ask that they be included so we have an overall review and package so everything's inclusive. From what Councilor Miskowski said 6 months ago, there was direction to do something and nothing's been done, at least to our knowledge. And this is a growing problem. I know in my district, we had a billboard up, and I know we can't restrict what's on the billboard, but it was a very offensive billboard to the community, and the particular company was totally arrogant, unresponsive, and doing anything about that billboard. Repeated calls to the company were ignored. They were absolutely totally arrogant and didn't care about the community. And with neighborhood councils in our position of trying to enhance quality of life, when the arrogance is that blatant, that bold to a council office and to the neighbors, it shows they don't care about anything other than the green dollar and nothing else. So everything that's been talked about, I fully support Jack's motion, the other amendments to it, but we need to make sure that the entities work together. I know that when you want to do some advertising, you go to a billboard company, they will give you a map of every billboard available and the sizes and the rates and everything inclusive. They have all that information, and there's a number of billboard companies that are in operation in our city. We need to do this in a cooperative effort and bring in everyone that's involved. And as Councilman Miskowski said, in 2 weeks, bring it back and move forward on it and put an end to it. And if we're going to ban billboards from Los Angeles or do some regulation, and I think that we are going to permit what is reasonable and prudent, but at the same time, bring some dollars into the city because they are charging these companies thousands and thousands of dollars to do advertising, and it's a blight in many communities. And when a company is very arrogant and won't comply with common decency on the billboard advertising, that speaks to some of the problems that we have to deal with. So everything that's been said, I think we all agree that Jack's motion stands and all these other amendments, and we'll get something done hopefully in 2 weeks. And just one more thing I learned, that, and I learned this from Councilmember Galanter prior to taking office, that when we make motions, we assume that the motion will move forward and things will get done. Oftentimes they're not unless someone thinks about it. I know if you pull up in the Los Angeles Times archives and put a name in, you can get any and all information. Maybe we need to do something with the city where these motions that we're passing, which are the actions taking place, we can capture that. Because many, many times things get lost in the system, and if Councilor Miskowski wasn't here today, and Councilmember Burton didn't remember, and Councilor Holden didn't remember, we wouldn't know. So there's got to be some capture of that information, and I thank you for getting that information back to us, but it illustrates a continuing problem that it's not that we're so big, it's that we're not as efficient as we need to be. You said that, Janice, and I commend you for that too. I commend everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sis. Somebody commend Mr. Zion. Mr. Holden.
President, members, each of you is saying you think you have a problem with the billboard industry. But what you need to know is that you have the power to fix it. You can tell what billboards are illegal by inspection. The law specifies that a billboard should be 300 feet from one to the other. If you go out there in your district, you see that it's 150 feet. One of those billboards are illegal, according to our law. Now, if you want to change the 300 feet to 500 feet because you have a proliferation of billboards, then you have the power to do that. It's called Just Do It. And what we're doing is talking about it. Now, you have to have someone who, Mr. Weiss, someone is going to have to rise to the level of saying that they're going to be the person to oversee billboards and that industry in the city of Los Angeles. Hopefully be one of the council persons, maybe it'll be you. And as these problems come up, take the lead in fixing the problem. Now, Mr. Brady held that role before. Mr. Koski didn't pick up the mantle on this one. Mr. Brady came close to banning all billboards in the city of Los Angeles. Am I right? That's right. That's right. The vote was 7-8. All right? I was against him. Otherwise, you'd have banned all billboards in the city of Los Angeles. He has got 7 votes holding. It was tie votes. And I decided whether or not I liked Marvin or do I like the vote. Nevertheless, I voted against what he was doing because I didn't think a ban was the appropriate thing to do at the time, but to have some control. No, the proliferation of billboards is the problem. I'm not saying you're going to ban your way of life. I mean, they put a lot of good advertising on billboards, community service advertising. Make your community safe. Go back to school. Stop crime, stop violence. They do. I mean, a lot is given of the industry that we don't otherwise provide for the industry. So I would say, yes, I support what you're doing, Mr. Weiss, but it didn't go far enough. For example, we can cause this problem to go away. We can't identify those billboards based on your motion. We can also go further and say that those industries, the billboard companies that fail to provide the information and put that decal on, that we will send them a notice, you can have an ordinance, that we will rip the billboard down. We'll give you a certain amount of time to comply. Failure to comply, we'll rip it down and we'll charge you for it. It's so easy. You have the power to fix the problem. We should have the will to exercise that power to fix the problem. If we in fact believe that there is a proliferation and they're really attacking certain neighborhoods like yours and mine on Pico Boulevard, hey, it's easy, we can deal with it. All right? I'll support you.
Mr. Burnson.
Well, I think we're all in the same course. Let me just say that the sign task force, which deals also with billboards, will be meeting on January 30th. Any of you who are interested, I'd invite you to attend. Second of all, I would also invite each of the council offices to take an inventory, have their staff take an inventory of the billboards in their district. That includes pole signs, ones that are on lawns, whatever you have in categories, and bring them to the task force on the 30th. And I'm going to tell you, I'm not sure we can do exactly what Mr. Holden suggested because we have, according to additional state legislation, that if we amortize or take down a billboard, we have to pay them for the cost not only of the board, but the future revenue that comes in from it for the period of time. So it's a very, if it's illegal, no. But, excuse me, Nate, would you please? Thank you. I'll try to get in order. What I think we need to do is basically require the billboard companies to furnish us with copies of all the permits that they have for their billboards. And we can assume that if they don't have a permit for it, that they're going to have to prove that it's legal. They should have a copy of their, which makes it a little easier than having inspectors go through all the microfiche. I think putting the burden with the billboard companies, showing us a permit for any board they have, and if they don't have it, we'll assume that they're illegal. And I think it's time that we go to court and test the latest legislation which said that anything illegal over 5 years is deemed to be legal. I don't think that the state has the authority to usurp local authority when it comes to land use. The courts have continually upheld local government on this issue. So the way to test that is to start tearing down at least a couple of these signs, and we'll find out whether we have the authority or not. So I'm prepared to move forward with this thing. I think it's unfortunate that it's come to this, but I think the billboard company, at least the one that contracted with MTA, may have cooked the goose for the good operators, because I think they may have probably any ordinances which are outstanding, including the exchange for the old signs is probably dead as a result, and possibly legislation that will stop all billboards. So anyway, we're working on this. One of the big problems, Jack, and you're getting into this fighting, and I like that, is getting the various agencies to do what we ask them to do. And I think what Ms. Misikowski has just brought to our attention, I recall we did that, right? What's happened? Nothing, okay? So we can make all the legislation we want, but if we don't have the ability to make sure that it's enforced, and that's what we have to work on. And I would invite the city attorney to come to the next meeting we have personally. I think Rocky is in our corner. I think he'll do. New city attorney, I think he's anxious to do what's important and what we want done, and what the people of Los Angeles want done, and I think that we can move forward on it. Remember, that's January 30th. Anybody who wishes to come, Mr. Reyes is on that committee. Originally, it was the planning committee. When Ms. Misikowski was a member of it, we invited various people from the community, homeowners, people in the sign industry, people in so that we can get a cross-section and make recommendations. We've already asked for drafting of legislation on certain types of signs. I don't know where that is either, Mr. Reyes. We need to find out where the legislation is.
Thank you, Mr. Burns.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Pacheco.
I understand a portion of this is going, Mr. President and colleagues, I understand a portion is going to Budget and Finance. At that point, can we get a report from the City Attorney's Office regarding, I wasn't sure if we were going to go to the voters for tax, if it was going to be the property owner as an income tax, or a tax on the industry and the legalities of either one, if there's any First Amendment implications or anything. So can we get a report on that issue?
I can have somebody at Budget and Finance to discuss those issues. Are you asking for a written report? Or?
Well, at least a first blush look at it. What other jurisdictions have done so that we can get that report in the Budget and Finance?
It may be more appropriate to have a fee rather than a tax.
Well, you know what, now that you mention it, why don't we have a report based on a fee and what the parameters are for a fee, and then the option of going to the voters, because I know we have to under Prop 218 go to the voters for any tax. So we have both of them in that little report? The City Attorney's Office?
I'll have somebody, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And when is that meeting? Are you planning to have it on the agenda next week or 2 weeks?
Next, where's my Budget and Finance person? Next week?
What I was going to suggest, Mr. Pacheco, is I think that's an excellent idea, and I agree with the concept. That concept, I believe, is contained in the legislation before us today, and per Councilmember Misikowski's suggestion, we will be coming back in 2 weeks with a proposed draft ordinance, which is then going to go through the process. And so that's what this examination of that issue is precisely one of the things that is called for by this legislation today. That proposed legislation could go to Budget and Finance as well, if that's what you're asking?
No. I'm not asking for the proposed legislation to go to Budget and Finance. I was just piggybacking off the fact that we sent 27A to Budget and Finance. We did not send 27A. The clerk shake her head saying.
I'm sorry, on the motion, it just says ordinance to be submitted to Planning and Land Use Committee, unless I'm...
Well, Budget and Finance as well would be.
Okay.
Well, there was an amendment that allocated resources.
Right, and that should go to Budget and Finance, and there's also the second...
That's going to Budget and Finance, right? So, since we're going to Budget and Finance on that, I just want to put the council and the committee in the position to discuss the revenue implications of a fee or a tax in terms of what our options are in terms of creating general fund money for this issue. I just want to make sure that our legal team is ahead of the curve, and that we're not going back another day after. That's what I'm trying to get the legal team up to speed. So when it gets on the agenda, now, Mr. Weiss mentioned coming back in 2 weeks. So do you want me to calendar the money portion that's being sent to Budget and Finance in 2 weeks or in 1 week? What do you prefer?
made a motion that the entire action, all of the directions that the City Council gave to the various departments on June 1st, we have a status report back here with the City Attorney, with Plum, with Building and Safety, as to the issues, all of the issues, and one of the issues was the fee and the issues related to the 218 requirements, which are where per 218 we have to have a fee related or can go to a tax. So all of those should be a status report to this council 2 weeks from today.
And just a point of clarification, this motion today requests that the city attorney draft an ordinance that does the things we've been talking about, or report back to this council in 2 weeks on the legal infeasibility of doing so. So net, we should have a draft ordinance within 2 weeks that accomplishes the things we've been talking about. I see the various representatives from departments, the Attorney's Office, CLA here. We'll all caucus after this meeting to make sure we all know what our margin is.
And ideally, all the matters come back together to the full council for action. That obviously is contingent upon appropriate actions being taken by the committee. Mr. Pacheco.
With those clarifications, then I'm just going to emphasize that when the earlier statement said all departments, that we were including the city attorney's legal analysis on both options. The permit as a fee and the 218 going to the voters. And I would hope that that report from the city attorney's office includes what other jurisdictions in the state of California or in the country are doing.
Okay, thank you. I have on the queue Ms. Hahn for a second time, Ms. Mizikowski for a second time, and, excuse me, and Mr. Weiss wishing to close.
Because I feel like this last discussion is off on another, it's not on what's before us. I mean, I just want some clarification on, we're voting on, seems to me a bit, the 27, the 27A are a bit in conflict because 27 says we're asking the billboard companies to provide the inventory. 27A says we're transferring money to Building and Safety to hire inspectors to do the inventory.
To respond to that information, to process that information, to verify that information, but the guts of the motion requires the billboard companies to provide the city with the inventory. The point of the motion is not to have Building and Safety go out and create it on their own. So they're not a company.
Okay, so 27A is just responding to this voluntary inventory that comes from the billboard.
Well, it's not voluntary because it's going to be law.
Well, I mean, but they're... Okay, my question is...
That's an important distinction.
Well, okay. It is included in the initial inventory their ability to produce a permit.
That should be something that will be included in the proposed ordinance.
Well, I didn't see that because it seems to me that would be a big part of it. They should be able to produce a permit for every location that they're giving us.
I agree.
I mean, you're saying you want the burden to be on the billboard company. It seems to me that's the initial burden, is for them to come up saying, we've got this permit. It seems to me that saves 27A a little bit of time from trying to look for it, to see if it's there, and that seems to me, if we're going to put the burden on the billboard company, I would want to include that not only they give an inventory, they produce a permit for each location.
I agree. That's the intent. That's the intent of the motion.
Well, I didn't see that. I'd like that in there as a friendly amendment.
Friendly clarifying amendment, absolutely.
Okay, and it's accepted as a friendly amendment, and even if matters aren't formally included today, members in this and similar items in the past, tell us welcome on behalf of the department or other offices of the city. Input from council members after council action on specific matters or considerations to include in the reports that we're requesting. Ms. Mizikowski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, one of the things we had asked on June 1st is interesting. We asked the city attorney specifically to draft a letter to go to the billboard companies asking them to, through an official correspondence from the city attorney, that all billboard companies operating in the city of LA require them to produce the permits of all their locations within 60 days. This is what we acted on. Actually,
I believe we did draft it and it went out.
Well, don't believe it, that's the case. Because the city attorney advised, the city attorney drafted the letter and then came back and advised us that they couldn't send this letter and say, show us your permits until we required passed the ordinance that said that the permits shall be valid and verified and shown, because the city attorney advised us at that time that we'd be asking companies to necessarily put themselves in jeopardy until we had the underlying ordinance. So again, the underlying ordinance that was requested, that is being reiterated and reinforced by Mr. Weiss's motion, is appropriate. And that's why, members of the council, if you pull up the council file index on the June 1st action, you'll see about 12 different directions that this council gave comprehensively on all these items. That's what I want a report on comprehensively from all the appropriate agencies, giving us this detail, giving us, not necessarily the history, but giving us that in 2 weeks so we know where we go from here, and we have those options before and can really give specific time direction. But those items have been looked at. It's appropriate the council had. One of the things that I was telling some of the others, the problem in the past, I don't think that there was a lack of will on the part of the departments to do this, but in a comprehensive package with multiple agencies, they are all working on it and really working, waiting for the planning department to do the issue on the freeway signs, which was part of this and actually the moving part of the whole thing. So they were waiting for that and have everything else fall in line. I think it will be clear when we have our meeting in 2 weeks that we're saying these aren't necessarily joined. Let's move on those things that we can move on quickly, separate, that we don't have to wait for a comprehensive package to do everything. And that status report, that meeting 2 weeks from today on this issue, I think is going to be a very important one for the council to move forward.
Mr. Reyes.
Just for the record, the idea that I want to promote as far as finding a way to improve those local areas where these billboards are being built. If we can look at the concept of getting a percentage of that profit margin to help that local community in one way or another, I don't want that idea to get lost in this process. So if it could either happen at the briefing when we get that briefing, or it could happen at another step, but I know it's a very complicated issue. One thing I really would like to know is how much money are these companies making? And I just want to know, okay, what is real and what isn't?
I think Mr. Pacheco won't allow us to oversee that. And to close, Mr. Weiss.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I just want to briefly thank you all for supporting this measure, and I think it really is going to send a very strong signal to our constituents, to billboard companies, and to the city of Los Angeles that today the City Council has taken an important step in unison to try to get a handle on this problem of illegal billboards. That's what we're trying to tackle here today. This is not the days of yore when we had 8 to 7 votes on this sort of an issue. Starting with Mr. Burns' leadership a few weeks ago, I think this council has shown very clearly that in this area of public policy, it's united. This council is determined to make strong, effective public policy, and I look forward to the next several weeks to work with the folks from the city attorney's office, the CLA's office, and the relevant departments to come up with something meaningful which we can all enact.
Thank you very much, and that's a concluding discussion. I believe we're ready for a vote. Madam Clerk.
Mr. President, there were several amendments. However, I believe they were accepted as friendly amendments. So do you wish to vote on the whole item as amended?
Take a vote on item number 27 as amended. Mr. Rudy Thomas.
Mr. President, members of the council, I appreciate the discussion. Madam City Attorney, you might want to give some indication as to how that which is before us impacts the previously advanced discussion in terms of the ordinance that's being reviewed by the city attorney.
I believe that it will come back in 2 weeks, and there will be something before you from our office. There should be a draft of ordinance and a report.
How this relates to that is the question. I'm sorry? But this offers additional.
Yes, and we'll be bringing a report back on what was discussed today and on the status of what went out in June and what's happened.
There's a request here that essentially modifies the pre-existing ordinance, does it not?
Requesting draft of an ordinance
I'd
issue
have to
requirements
look-
for counting and inventory advertising billboards.
I think
No.
this could all meld in
You can't say
together.
it's a different ordinance, Jack. It could very well impact that ordinance, some of which is already in that ordinance, and to the extent that that is the case, we need to be clear as to how the two
And when we
I'm
come
not
back
speaking
in
against
2
the
weeks,
ordinance, we just need to make sure it's,
when we come back in 2 weeks, that will be presented to you.
yeah, well, make sure that this isn't already addressed, because there are fees, penalties, additional funding opportunities for building and safety in the ordinance that went forward.
Okay.
There was an
I think it'll all be aired out on that session in 2 weeks. With that, I believe we're ready for a vote. The matter is amended. Please open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
That is approved. Mr. Pacheco?
Mr. President, I would ask I'd like to move to reconsider items 8 and 9.
Okay, request for reconsideration of items 8 and 9. Please open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
8 and 9 are now reconsidered and before us.
Mr. President, colleagues, I would simply ask you to reconsider these items because there's been some information that I want to do a little bit of research on, that the construction managers on these projects, there's been some allegations that they may be having subcontractors who are minority firms for their RFP submissions, but when the moment of truth comes for the work, they give explanations that the work has been reduced, and these subcontractors who are minority or women-based don't get all their work that they were committed to when they applied. So I want to look into that. I don't want to prejudge this. So I would simply ask for a continuance to Friday so I can do some further homework on that question and that issue. So I ask that the matters 8 and 9 be continued to Friday.
Ms. Han, did you wish to be heard on the motion to continue?
I agree with that, but I just want to say I've had a lot of those complaints from women-owned and minority-owned businesses. I think it's something we ought to look at citywide, not just on these two issues. So hopefully we can look at this problem citywide. This is a problem. We are not supporting our minority and women-owned businesses when we award contracts like I think we think we are.
Okay, thank you. Then I believe without objection, items 8 and 9 are continued to this Friday, January 18th. Next item, please.
Next item, Mr. President, not on the agenda, special one, motion presented by Councilmember Perry, seconded by Councilmember Reyes, and the city attorney will explain the need for the findings.
Before we go to the city attorney, Mr. Rudy Thomas.
Mr. President, may I request forthwith on item number 4?
Forthwith on 4. Madam City Attorney, on the findings for special one.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. President. This has to do with the acquisition of 7 properties between Los Angeles Street, 1st Street, 2nd Street, and Spring for the new Caltrans headquarters. Settlement was just finished yesterday. Closing is Friday. And therefore, the council would need to make the findings that the need to act arose after the posting of the agenda and that there's an immediate need to act.
Okay, anybody wishing to be heard on the findings? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
Special one now before us. Members wishing to be heard? Ms. Perry.
I hope and I'm asking other council members to support this so we can proceed with this project. This will be a visionary, world-class opportunity for the Civic Center, and I would ask Mr. Miller just to make a brief presentation on the concept.
As you recall, this project, the city will be purchasing the land along 1st Street and then exchange it with the state of California. They'll control the entire block across from City Hall South. When they're done with their new building, they'll tear the old one down and convey it to us, and we'll have the entire block across from this building. What's before you is a settlement with property owners of 3 of the major parcels, actually more than half of that property. There is no financial exposure to the city on this. The city will increase the purchase price to cover attorney's fees, and the state will then reimburse the city by incurring some of the demolition costs.
Ms. Perry? Anybody else wishing to be heard? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please open the roll on special 1. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
Special 1 is approved. Next item, please.
Next item, Mr. President, this is the time for comments from the public on items not on the agenda under council's jurisdiction.
Okay, public comment period for today's meeting. The council calls forward Mr. Michael St. Hill to be followed by Mort Allen.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As you noticed, I'm still alive. I want to tell you I'm impervious to confusion that goes on in LA. When you, members of this council, and who uses my name to cause me conflict, I'm impervious to all of that, and I'm still alive. I would like council to ask the Great Chieftain Parks of the police department, LA Police Department, to ask his warlords at the helicopter division to please drop my name from their row of people who they think that might be dangerous. It doesn't bother me one bit, and I can see a very large lawsuit coming up if this doesn't stop. I will continue to do the things I always naturally do. Never have I broken the law, and I have no intention of doing so. But I can tell you I have very good friends who will stand up behind me and say, what you're doing is wrong. Okay, so please ask the Great Chieftain Parks to ask the warlords at the helicopter division to drop my name from their list of folk who they think that.
Thank you very much.
Just because they think that whatever. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Mort Allen.
At least I know I'm being watched on television. I just want to say that this whole discussion in here just really made me sick. Has anybody in this council gone to the presidents of the billboard companies and sat down with them and said, we want this? Or is this all lobbyists making millions of dollars muddying up the water? Now, I got to tell you, I got a call yesterday. As most of you know, the Board of Education condemned Eller's property at Washington, Vermont, where they've been for 75 years, okay? They were all set there in escrow to go into the Harbor Gateway in the city of Los Angeles, build a $12 million facility. They're also planning to build a 100,000-foot building in Hollywood for 10 radio stations. As of yesterday, with everything in the paper, they want nothing more to do with the city of LA. And they're going to the city of Carson for their facility, they think. And you can't just badger a company that's been in business 80 years and compare it to a new company that puts up illegal signs. And what you're doing is, they got that letter last June, they gave a list of their boards, but everybody wants to badger everybody. And you still got a lot of power. I mean, billboards do elect city officials, and Mike Fuhrer knows that. And so you really got to think twice. Now, in our ad hoc committee for 3 years, I mean, we get to speak first. I brought up doing the same thing as a parking tax and the bed tax, which is 10.5% or something, because it's a visual thing. They don't care. They're making $100,000 a board. Look at the financial statements. LA is the second largest city. These companies are pulling in $1 billion. They want to sit and share with you. They want to talk to you, but they have to go through lobbyists and pay millions of dollars to get to you guys. And the whole thing is so out of hand. You take the $10 million from the toilets, the $10 million from the freeway signs, the city could use that $20 million. They don't care where it goes. They care about the bottom line. Now, Dennis had a problem with a little company that had a nude bar billboard, and they said, screw you. But if you call one of the big other companies, they will move it the next day. And you're blending it all together. And I just think that our task force has to get busy, And I think that somebody here better do something to keep these corporations from leaving the city. Okay?
Thank you very much. This concludes public comment for today's meeting. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Do you wish to clear the desk before going into closed session?
Let's do housekeeping.
Council has motions for posting and referral.
Those motions are posted and referred.
There are excuses on the desk. Councilmember Hahn requests to be excused Friday, January 25th to leave at noon for city business meets council policy. Excuse me, a motion is required.
On Ms. Hahn's excuse, Mr. Holden moves. Ms. Hahn is excused.
Councilmember Bernstein requests to be excused Tuesday, the 22nd, and that is the off-site meeting, and that's for personal business.
Okay, does that require a motion?
I'm sorry, it meets council policy.
Mr. Bernstein is excused.
Councilmember Holden requests to be excused Friday, February 1st, personal business, that meets council policy.
Mr. Holden is excused.
And Councilmember Holden requests to be excused city business, February 5th, 6th, and 8th, and that also meets council policy.
That is also excused.
That clears the desk for closed session.
Okay, in conformance with California law, the council will now adjourn into closed session. I ask the guards to please clear the chambers. Welcome back into open session. Madam Clerk, next item before us, please.
Before the council, item number 30A is settlement in the amount of $125,000 in the case of Bernarda Phipps et al. Versus City of Los Angeles.
Please open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
That is approved.
That clears the desk.
Okay, any announcements? Please stand for adjourning motions. Mr. Pacheco.
Mr. President, colleagues, I would ask that we adjourn in memory of Ms. Danielle Cox, who passed away on January 9th, 2002, as part of a traffic accident on Figueroa Boulevard. She was exiting Burwood. Many of you maybe remember a couple of years ago, there was a little child killed on Figueroa Boulevard. In this case, two individuals were racing down Figueroa Boulevard, and as she pulled out of Burwood Street, one of them collided with her, and they're going to be charged with manslaughter. So. She's a very active community member, active in her church, and generally a very good humanitarian. She is survived by her two fathers, Manuel Hernandez and Frank Mendoza, her sister Marina Alcarez, and her she has two grandmothers, aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, and of course all of her close friends who are going to miss her. She was, I believe, in her mid-20s, yes.
Any others? Colleagues, I ask that you join me in adjourning in memory of Efren Olvera, who was better known as Shorty in the Northeast San Fernando Valley. I think over the last 2.5 years, you've heard me tell stories on occasion about the infamous intersection of Haddon and Mercer, and how growing up it was plagued with crime, with drugs, with prostitution and violence. Shorty was the gentleman who lived around the corner and was the first and the most active in organizing the neighbors in what became our Neighborhood Watch, the Haddon Mercer Homeowners Organization, of which my parents were early members and active in for a long, long time. And his participation in the community never wavered. On his own time, he was retired. He patrolled the neighborhood. He had a walkie-talkie with a direct line to Foothill Division, and he was vigilant against gangs. He was vigilant against graffiti, and his activism never wavered in that neighborhood watch group that continues to this day. He passed away Monday evening during open heart surgery after many complications, and he's left his imprint in my neighborhood, in the city of Los Angeles, and I and my district and the city will surely miss him and his commitment. I ask that we adjourn in his memory. Madam Clerk, please call the roll. Thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.